I am the president and CEO of the San Diego Foundation here in San Diego. I've been on the job only 6 months now, so I'm in learning mode just like you are, and I'm just having the time of my life learning more about San Diego than I ever thought I would learn. My background has been primarily in health, although this is, if I count it correctly, my 4th career. So I'm 56 years old, and I've changed careers about 4 times. I started out in banking, believe it or not, and actually I started out in banking after high school because it was the job that I could get. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't able to go to college full-time, so I knew I was going to go to school part-time and work part-time, and the bank gave me the opportunity to do both. I transitioned from banking to higher education, believe it or not, where I helped develop adult degree programs for the University of Phoenix. And you see these programs now, but in the 80s, they were pretty new. Programs like University of Phoenix adult degree programs, Webster University, those National University. I was actually on the cutting edge of those adult degree programs that allowed adults without bachelor's degrees who were working full-time to go earn their bachelor's degrees. I left adult education and went to healthcare, working in healthcare primarily because a professor of mine had suggested that maybe healthcare would be an arena that I would be interested in. He ran a hospital, he liked the work that I did, and he reached out and said, I've got a position at the hospital and I'd like to bring you on. So it was sort of an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. Somebody saw my talents and wanted to recognize them, and I felt like I could move on from there. And then I found philanthropy. And I found philanthropy primarily through my partnerships and relationships in the community. And that's a theme that I'm going to want to talk about a lot this morning as we began thinking about when Raj said to me, how did you get here? And I really do mean with a lot of help from my friends and my family, because it was the network that I developed that created the opportunity for me to go to the California Endowment 7 years ago. I had a network of friends who reached out to the president and CEO, Dr. Bob Ross, who was looking for an executive vice president, and they said, Kathlyn Mead's your girl. She'll be the person who can actually manage the organization while you're the strategist and the external face to the organization, and I think the two of you will work well together. And when Bob heard that several times from people that we knew in common and people we both respected, it created an opportunity for me to enter a new field. And I believe that all of my experience in banking, finance, education, healthcare brought me to where I am today at the San Diego Foundation, because I'm able now in this job to be able to look at San Diego in a very comprehensive way and understand all of the aspects and infrastructure that make up a really vibrant community, and how our very generous community can actually help advance each of these areas and more, so that we can have a San Diego that everyone, it doesn't matter your place in the socioeconomic scale, but that everyone can feel they are a part of, and that they can actually live, work, enjoy being in San Diego.
That was beautifully done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you know, your story seems to indicate a lot of personality traits and leadership qualities that help to get where you are. What would you say is your leadership style, and what are some of your leadership strengths, the qualities that you possess?
Sure. Well, first of all, I will tell you that I'm going to talk about a few personal attributes. And one is, it's sometimes an adjective that I think people will see negatively, but I'm pretty stubborn. And that stubbornness allows me to say, gosh, I can do that. There are very few times in my life when I've not been able to say, you know, somebody will put up a roadblock and I'll think, I can do that. I'm going to go around that roadblock. I don't have to have that get in the way. Now, you can define it in a lot of different terms and words. It can be stubbornness. It could be perseverance. It could be just my willingness to work hard. But that is something that I think has to be fundamental in you if you want to be successful, and certainly has helped me throughout the years. It's my willingness to just continue to work at something and to know the difference between sort of butting my head against a wall and fighting it, or saying, how do I get around that wall? I still want to get to what's on the other side of the wall, but there are different ways of doing that. So I think that's fundamental in me. Certainly if you ask my parents, they'll tell you that that's the case. Now, from a leadership perspective, I will tell you that, you know, I don't know how early in life you realized you were a leader, but I'd love for you to think about that. What point in your life did you realize you were a leader? It might have been when you were 7 or 8 years old, and you were the person in the neighborhood who was organizing the playground activities in your neighborhood during the summer. Somebody had to do it, right? Somebody had to knock on the doors and say, let's go play some wiffle ball, or let's go explore that lake down the road. Let's go walk along the river. You know, somebody created the need for everybody else to do that, and it could have been very young in your life. I just want you to think about that for a moment, because I'll tell you when I realized I was a leader, and it had nothing to do, frankly, with academics, and it had nothing to do really with somebody saying, we need a leader of this group. But it was when I was in 8th grade, and we were transitioning from what was traditionally grade school to high school. And I realized that we were going to be, the next year, beginning to be merged with the other grade school and other students, it was middle school, and other students from other schools in one big high school. And for some reason, I realized that there was going to be this opportunity for those of us who had been together to sort of stick together, or for us in high school to start sort of breaking apart, because there were new influences and activities and opportunities for each of us. So I just organized a year-end party for all of us. And it was actually really kind of interesting, because it was word of mouth. And in those days, it really was word of mouth. We didn't have cell phones and Facebook. And, you know, I just said, hey, let's all get together on a Saturday. I grew up in Colorado. So there was a particular place in the mountains that I had gone to, and that would be a great place for us to hang out during the day. It meant we had to get rides with older brothers or sisters or parents. And I just organized it. And I didn't know who was going to show up or who wasn't going to show up, but people showed up. And it was at that moment, that weekend, when I realized I just made something happen. A teacher, a parent, friends, nobody actually asked me to do it, but I did it. And when people start showing up because you say, this is a fun thing to do, it may be our last chance to be together without this infusion of new faces and new people, people showed up. And I realized then that I was a leader. And then I went into high school, and there were opportunities to be a leader in high school, but again, I didn't stand out. I wasn't the star in high school from an academic perspective. I played sports. I was never the captain of the team. I was never the number 1 or 2 person on the team. I played gymnastics, and I was probably like 4th or 5th on the team. I ran track. I was like probably 6th or 7th on the team. I just was never the best, but I found things I liked to do, and I engaged in them, and I participated, and I made friends with people on the team, and I made friends with people off the team, encouraging people to come watch us. And I just realized that I could get people energized about being part of something, even though I might not have been the class president or the class treasurer or secretary or the #1 person on the team. I just realized I could get people to do things. Fast forward many years later to my MBA program, and I remember very early on in that program when one of my professors said, "You know why most people want to work with you, all of you who are in this room? It's because they like you." And I realized that being a leader means that you have to really put yourself out there. You have to come up with great ideas that people are going to glom onto, or ideas that people are going to say, "Gee, why would we want to do that?" But you have to have this willingness to put yourself out there and have people like you for the great ideas or for the ideas that aren't so great that they get to help refine. And so I think leadership actually begins with your relationships with other people. And if you think about that today, think about your relationships when you were younger, and think about the relationships that you've developed through high school and now in college, and the relationships that are going to be incumbent upon you, and a lot harder to develop once you leave college, that is going to be incumbent upon you to be a leader and establish those relationships.
Great advice. Jim?
Kathlyn, the San Diego Foundation is an important piece of the fabric of this city. Who are your constituencies? Who do you serve? Educate us a little bit.
Sure. So the San Diego Foundation is a philanthropic organization whose goal is to increase philanthropy throughout San Diego. Our constituents are basically everyone who is a citizen of San Diego. And I would say that our constituents are probably also people who've left San Diego, but they still have a passion and a place in their heart for San Diego. Now, when we talk about philanthropy, philanthropy is often defined as time, talent, or treasure. And when we think about time, we think about volunteerism. So, how many people in this room have volunteered? Pretty much everybody. It's kind of interesting because I never knew about volunteerism as I was growing up. We just didn't talk about it in the classroom. Yet as my children grew up, they were required to actually complete community service hours to graduate from high school, and they looked to volunteer at a variety of different places. And in college they volunteered, and it looks like many of you have volunteered. That you are philanthropists. Your time is of value, and the time you've given to community and to organization is valued not only to those organizations, but to the ultimate recipients of your service to those organizations. So your time is philanthropy. Talent. Now your talent is the skills, those skill sets that you bring to the table, that you will likely bring to the table as a volunteer, but you may bring that talent to the table working for a nonprofit organization in San Diego. Many of us begin to think about as business majors, right? Well, I'm going to go out into the business world and I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and I'm going to join an entrepreneurial organization. I'm going to potentially look at the opportunity for me to make money, etc. Some of us will think about, how do I give back to my community with my business degree by joining a nonprofit organization? Because nonprofit organizations need to make a profit too. In fact, an organization that is a nonprofit that is not making a profit will not remain in business very long. So your talent may be that you want to work with an organization in the community that is doing social good in the community. That could be healthcare related purposes, those could be education, it could be government, it could be bringing your talent, your expertise, your knowledge to organizations that are primarily giving back to their communities through social and other services. Finally, treasure. Now, each of us typically think about where we can give donation dollars. How many people have donated your own dollars, not your parents' dollars, but your dollars to an organization? Many of you. Many of you. We see this happening all the time. We see the gifts of our generosity happening online. I don't know how many of you have watched concerts, and at the end they'll say, text this 3-digit number to make a $10 pledge. You just became a philanthropist when you made that $10 pledge to support something like Hurricane Katrina or Sandy on the East Coast, or access to food. You were a philanthropist when you gave of your own money to those organizations. We work with a lot of the major philanthropists in our community who've done very well in their careers and have said, I am now able financially to give back to this community in a very big way. The San Diego Foundation distributes, through our donor base, approximately $50 million in San Diego every year. Those dollars are used to support things like food security, access to food, like the food bank here in San Diego. They support health and human services, our community health centers in San Diego for those people who may not have insurance and access to direct health care services. Those dollars support things like domestic violence programs in our community, or other programs like arts and culture, where we can ensure that arts and culture are available to students and adults, not only for our enjoyment, but for learning in our community. So we've got a very rich donor base that understands that these services are often not funded 100%. And they want to see these services provided in our community. So they contribute of their own financial resources to fill the gap between existing funding and funding needs. So philanthropy and the San Diego Foundation touches everyone, because not only are there people like you and your families and our donor base who are giving of their time, talent, and treasure, but we also work with the recipients of that generosity. We work with the nonprofits in this community to ensure that we connect them to the donors, to ensure that they get the time, talent, and treasure, the support they need. So we spend a lot of time in the community working to build the bridge between generosity and need in San Diego.
Was the healthcare organization that you worked in for-profit or not-for-profit?
Nonprofit. So my career in San Diego actually started at Children's Hospital here in San Diego, which is a nonprofit entity. I then left Children's Hospital to run a nonprofit HMO. And that nonprofit HMO was owned by the Sharp Healthcare System. And in San Diego, as you know, the Sharp Healthcare System, among other hospital systems, manages to support not only our needs in San Diego, but patients who come from Imperial County, from across the border, et cetera. But our HMO was nonprofit, and yet we had to make money. It was a very transaction-heavy organization. We had to ensure that we were generating revenue so that we could put that money back into the organization for things like improved technology, outreach to consumers, et cetera. So in a nonprofit environment, your profits go back into the organization so you can improve the organization.
So the first half of your 4 careers, the first 2 were for-profit.
Yes.
Second 2, not-for-profit. what did you find to be the major differences in either personally or your approach, and especially your leadership approach?
Well, I will tell you that I don't think I saw a lot of major differences in terms of the way the business was done. So, finance and banking. Finance and banking is very interested in the relationship with their customer, their client, with you. I worked for for-profit education. The University of Phoenix is for-profit education, unlike Cal State San Marcos and other for-profit. Each day, what we were concerned about was how we could ensure that our students were graduating with a degree that was going to help them advance their careers, the career of their choice in their community. I didn't recognize that there was much of a difference in terms of that for-profit experience and my not-for-profit experience. It was very customer and client oriented. It was dependent on us really understanding our revenue model and controlling our expenses. It was dependent upon us really recognizing our business plan and what we needed to do to remain relevant into the future. So I didn't experience much of a difference in terms of leadership or in terms of a difference in terms of how we operated the businesses. The difference was here. It was in how I felt about going to work every day. So when I started to work at Children's Hospital and Sharp Healthcare, I remember feeling every day like what I was coming to work for really mattered in the lives of these people, and it really mattered in my life, the connections I was making with the clients, the customers, the consumers. There was just a difference in terms of the consumer base, because in the finance industry, the consumer base was really going out and getting what they wanted, the relationship with the bank they wanted. In healthcare, working with community clinics, with hospitals, with other providers, people were accessing the services they needed. And it felt different. But it didn't cause me to behave differently in my job or in my leadership style.
Kathlyn, you talked about nonprofits working for both nonprofit and profit organizations. There's a lot written about women and leadership and the challenges that women face. The existence of the glass ceiling. Sometimes they call it a labyrinth. So people don't necessarily face those barriers when they hit the glass ceiling. They face it in the workforce at lower levels of the organization. So the thinking is that you have to navigate that maze as soon as you enter the organization, even at lower levels. You worked for several different types of organizations in your career. I was wondering whether one culture was more supportive of women. Have you faced any unique challenges making your way through your career as a woman?
So I will tell you that as a woman, my entire career has been a challenge. Part of it had to do with the fact that I started in a field, in an industry in banking that was primarily male-dominated, and yet I found a mentor who was willing to help me learn the business and the industry and support me. And I realized that the important thing for me, whether it was in that job or working my way up that career ladder, was in the relationships I established. Those relationships had to be with others who were interested not only in their success, but mine. And not everyone is interested in your success, and you have to be very careful about those relationships you establish, and you have to be as willing to be as interested in their success as your own. I just met with our management team 2 weeks ago. And again, I'm new to the organization. I've just recently gone through a reorganization. And our management team was sitting around the room together. And I said, let's just take a moment, look around the room. You are all responsible for one another's success. So if you look around the room and you say, I cannot feel like I can be as responsible for this person's success, then it is up to you to go talk with that person, understand them, understand why they're sitting around the table, why they want to be here, and so that you can come back in this door the next time we meet and say, I am responsible for this person's success, just as much as I am responsible for my own. And that took a lot of time for me to understand that growing into my career, who wanted to be responsible for my success and whose success I wanted to be responsible for. But ultimately, I realized that all of us were responsible for the organization's success. And if we weren't all on the same page about how our success was interwoven, we would not be ensuring the organization's success. Certainly, I will say that as a woman, I felt like I had to work a lot harder. And I will tell you that I stand on the shoulders of other women who came before me. And women in this room, you get to stand on the shoulders of the women who come before you, and the men who helped to pave the way for women. But it's been a difficult challenge for me throughout my career. I've been told things like, I was too pretty, or I wasn't pretty enough. I was too smart. I wasn't smart enough. I sat in the boardroom and waited for people to raise their hands when work needed to be done, and no one raised their hand, and so I raised my hand. Even though I was, for a time, a single parent of 3 children, and it meant that I was working harder, it seemed like, than anybody else, putting in nights and weekends. I don't think that is a particular trait, however, that has to be female. What I will tell you is that often throughout my career, there will be people who sit back and who will just simply say, I'm going to put in my time. And then there will be people who want to get ahead, and you're the ones who will raise your hand and say, I'll do it. I'll try it. You're the ones who will be willing to take the risk. I took several risks, and I will tell you that I didn't succeed all the time. I failed sometimes. But what I can tell you is if I didn't try, I didn't know. And so, yeah, I felt some struggles as a woman, but I think more importantly, I just felt a lot of struggle as a person to make sure that I had the stamina and the willingness to put in the time to succeed. It's not easy. It's a lot of hard work. But if you're willing to put in that hard work, you will succeed.
I think you made an excellent point about people trying to be responsible for each other's success and not just thinking, let me get a mentor and see what's in it for me. So you need to make sure that, and in good mentoring relationships, ensure that it's a win-win, that both parties get something out of, grow as a result. And we found that with our program here at Cal State San Marcos too. But how do you go about creating that culture? And if you're comfortable, can you talk about the reorganization where a number of people were let go? What are the reasons? And was it to make sure that you have now a culture that you want to set in the organization and want to work with? So
sure. Yeah. Yes, I'm comfortable talking about it. And the first thing that I should say to everyone is any decision you make, any difficult decision you make, you're going to have to explain. And so you should always feel comfortable before you make a decision saying, why am I making this decision? And am I comfortable in explaining it to somebody? And am I comfortable being able to ask questions about it? And if you're not, then you probably ought not to make that decision. Before I get into the question, I want to share something. The last few days, I was in Coachella Valley with the Clinton Foundation, and President Clinton was there moderating several panels, and I was so inspired to be in the audience and hear him speak. But the most important takeaway for me was when President Clinton said, working in transparency feels very uncomfortable, But once you're completely transparent, you look at yourself and say, why wasn't I always this transparent? The outcome of complete transparency is so great. So I'm going to be completely transparent with you, and I want you to ask me any questions later that you might have. And I want to encourage you through modeling this to always be transparent about the decisions you make. So, number one, I came to the San Diego Foundation, and I followed a CEO who had been in the position for 20 years, Bob Kelly. Bob Kelly is an absolute jewel to this community. Bob's style and mine, however, are very different. In 20 years, Bob grew this foundation from $60 million foundation to where it is today, which is about a $670 million foundation. So 10 times, 10x in a 20-year period of time. Bob's style in doing that was very different than mine. It's kind of like when you move into a house or an apartment, and you might look at that house and their apartment and you might say, that person liked to have a red living room. I kind of like my living room being gray. The person who was in that room, in that house before me, liked to have dark blinds in the bedroom. I like having no blinds in my bedroom because I like the sun waking me up in the morning. Our styles are very different, but we're living in the same house, and I'm okay with the fact that when I moved into this house, I needed to create a space and an environment that worked for me to be able to lead the team. And that meant that I felt the need to reorganize the shop. Bob's style was very much that the organization worked very collaboratively, and people were very much generalists, and they did a lot of the same jobs in different areas. So you might be somebody who works out in the community, and if you plan an event, you manage that event start to finish. My style tends to be that I like bright lines of responsibility that allow for people to cross between those bright lines and support each other in a very collaborative way. So if you're working in the community, but you want to put on a community event, I want you to work with somebody on the team who is an expert at putting on events. And that through that collaboration, your community work and that event will work together, and you will sort of cross-pollinate, work across disciplines, and bring the best of both those skill sets to the table. I don't believe that we can all really be best at multiple skill sets. We're going to be really good at one or two things and good at a few other things. I want us to have the opportunity to put forth every day, 80 to 90% of the time, the work that we are going to do our very best. And sometimes, 10 to 20% of the time, put forward that work that we are better at or okay at. But let's really hyper-focus on doing the things we do best. So our reorganization took down some dark blinds and put up clear blinds where I could wake up every day. I painted a few walls. I moved some desks. We created new responsibilities and job descriptions that were very clear. But most important to me was that we created portals for collaboration around the organization. Some that clearly existed in the past, but I wanted to put an exclamation point on that collaboration among our team. So we eliminated 13 positions, and we created 15 new positions. And every one of the people in those 13 positions that were eliminated had the opportunity to apply for the other positions. But to apply for those positions, they had to tell us what they were going to do differently in the future. They had to tell us how they were going to work more collaboratively in the future. They had to tell us how they saw that the organization and what we did was going to develop itself for the future, not just in terms of what we saw we needed today. So the reorganization is now not quite 30 days old. Our reorganization went into effect on January 1 of this year. And I will share with you that we're going through some change pains. Change management is difficult. We're figuring out how it is that we let go of something that we felt secure doing ourselves and having the trust that we could hand it off to a teammate and expect that it would be done just as well as we could do it, if not better. And that the communication and the milestones and the progress would be made so that everybody could trust that in the end, we will all have the outcome we desire. But I will tell you that even though we're going through those growing pains, I've experienced a new energy around our organization. I see people meeting up in small groups and talking. That may have occurred before I came, but I will tell you that I'm seeing it more often than I saw when I was first with the organization.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
San Diego is often described as the world's biggest little town. So what was something that surprised you, not necessarily in a positive way, when you sort of returned and took this role?
Yes, thank you. So a few things. I've been living in San Diego for 20 years. My career has been here. And even when I was working for the California Endowment, my home was still here. So I went to Los Angeles on Monday. I had an apartment there, and I came home usually Friday at noon. And so I was still engaged in the community to some extent, a couple and a half of days a week. I sat on a board while I was in San Diego to remain committed to the community. What surprised me when I came back to San Diego working on a full-time basis was how far the community had gone to becoming more collaborative. That again, different disciplines were working together, that there were these multiple convenings of different players, primarily in the nonprofit community. That struck me as very different than when I had left San Diego 7 years ago. What also struck me, not necessarily in the most positive way, was that although we were convening and although we were talking, we were still addressing some of the same problems and concerns that we had been addressing 7 years ago when I left working in San Diego full-time. That leap from convening one another and working together and talking about doing things together to actually doing it, there's a long road to going from talking to doing. And I think a big part of that has to do with the fact that we actually have to choose. There are so many needs in our community that we want to support, whether they're nonprofit communities or for-profit communities. But how do we determine what's most important? How do we prioritize, and where do we get started? And that's one of the things that I hope to do now that I'm in San Diego, is to work with the communities to say, if we could only do one thing this year, what would it be? So that we could actually use that as a springboard for then number 2 priority and number 3 priority. We can't have 7 things on our priority list and typically have 7 things on our priority list and get them all done and get them all done well. I think that number is usually 1 to 3. But I think if you get 1 to 3 done, it will actually accelerate the progress of 4 through 7 to be able to get done in a shorter period of time. But it's hard to prioritize, it's hard to choose, it's hard to focus. And those are the things that I really want to do in this community and work with our community leaders, is to focus, prioritize, and choose.
Boards of directors.
Yes.
Yes. So again, very different animals, especially in an entrepreneurial organization. you're probably having dinner with the board of directors. Then you grow up and you have outside board members. But the world of nonprofits, the board of directors are really quite different. Tell us about your relationship with them and what your expectations are for them in terms of supporting you, your team, and the organization.
Sure. So I've been really fortunate throughout my career to have a board of directors that has been very interested in the success of the organization, but also interested in the success of the staff that make up the organization. Quite often, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a for-profit enterprise or a nonprofit enterprise, quite often the number one expense item on a budget is personnel. Personnel expense and the benefits that are accrued to our employees is number one. That means you have to have a board of directors that really sees value in everyone that contributes to the success of the organization. Now, I will tell you that when I was contacted about this position at the San Diego Foundation, I knew I could do this job. I shared with you earlier that my background, my experience, I felt culminated in the opportunity to look very comprehensively at the community and to be able to say, how can I facilitate a community of volunteerism, a community of generosity, and how I can build the bridge and be the connector between generosity and need. I felt like I was absolutely prepared for that in my career. The reason that I came to this position and fought for this position was the board of directors. It's a very large board. It has can be up to, I believe, 35 board members. We oftentimes have 30 board members. Today we have 29. And my first thought was, that's a lot of board members, because you want to be in touch with your board members. You want to understand what their passions are, what their interests are, what they know about the community. You really want to understand what their reason and purpose for volunteering their time to be on a board is. And that means that you have to spend time with your board of directors outside of board and committee meetings. And I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to be able to make the time and find the time to do my job and keep in touch with this board of directors. And then I met them. And I realized that this board of directors is so committed to San Diego, and they bring their time, their talent, and their treasure for the betterment of our community, that I realized that I would absolutely have the stamina to meet with them as frequently as they could meet with me. And it didn't matter whether it was early morning for breakfast or late night, that I would find the time to meet with them, because I had so much to learn from them, from their successes as business people, as community leaders, as CEOs, and their interest today in volunteering on behalf of our community. Some of my board members are retired, and you wouldn't absolutely know it at all. They wake up every day and they volunteer with a variety of organizations in our community, moving from one board, one committee meeting, one event to the next, with complete joy for giving back to the community. I want to learn that. I want to understand from our board members what motivates them to do that, instead of just playing golf or tennis every day. Some of them still play golf and tennis, and they figure it out how to find time for all of those things, their passions for the community and their personal passions. But I get this opportunity to meet with 30 of our most civically minded, our most engaged community members, and I can tell you that I cannot spend enough time with them. Anybody who works with a board of directors should see their board of directors as allies, as supporters of their success, and they should try to be a sponge in learning from their board members every step of the way. I came to this position because of this board. I knew that whatever challenges I had in this job, I would have a board that would support me. Whether the challenge was internal, I have board members that I can work with who understand the inner workings of an organization, or the challenges were community-based challenges or political challenges. I had board members I could reach out to. So the board is my ally, they are my friends, they are my supporters, and I feel lucky every day to have this board of directors in my life.
Kathlyn, we could keep talking to you, just the two of us, but I know that the student team has prepared some great questions. Before I bring the first half of the team up, is there any, are there any words of wisdom that you absolutely, I know peppered throughout our conversation have been wonderful gems that the students can take and treasure and pursue throughout their career, but are there some closing thoughts that you absolutely want to share with the students as they sit in their seats and they prepare to go out and build their careers or find jobs?
My closing thoughts for you are really about your network. Grow that network. It's not about how many Facebook friends you have that you never talk to. It's about who you have coffee with, who you study with. How do those people in your network connect you to broader networks? How do they connect you to opportunities to be engaged in your community? How do they connect you to opportunities to challenge yourselves every day, to do something new and different that might take you a little bit out of your comfort zone? Surround yourself with people who are going to do that. And I will tell you, I absolutely believe in the power of connected networks. All of us are connected to the whole world. There are probably people on your Facebook and LinkedIn pages who don't even live in these United States of America, much less California. Keep those connections going, but your personal connections, your personal relationships are so important. Don't just spend time on the electronic method of relationship. Connect with someone personally every day. That's my best advice for you.
Thank you so much. Okay, guys, can we have the first half of the team up here? Turn the mics on.
All right, hello everyone. We are team numero uno. I'm Savannah Cuthbert. We're going to start out with more professional questions for Kathlyn today. So my first one I have for you is, I know you kind of already spoke about when you were in 8th grade and you realized you were a leader. But 20 years ago did you see yourself becoming a CEO of a company, or what did you really see yourself pursuing?
That's interesting. No, I actually didn't. So I'll tell you a story about my first CEO gig. I had a relationship, a professional relationship, partnership with Dr. James Kyle, who was with the Sharp Healthcare System. And I was at Children's Hospital at the time. I was a vice president, and I had only been in that vice president role for a couple of years, but I had been working in the community with several members of the community, again, multidisciplinary. And Dr. Kyle approached me and said he was leaving the organization. And he said to me, Kathlyn, I'd like to recommend you for this CEO position. And I will tell you that I did a big gulp. I just thought, I'm not prepared to be a CEO. I was, at the time, I think 36 years old. When you talk about 20 years ago, might have been 38, but I was still under 40. And I thought, how is it that I am prepared to run a $200 million company? And then I went home and spoke with my husband, and I told him this story, and he said, "You are absolutely prepared. You have been managing people. You've been managing budgets. You've been collaborating out in the community. You're absolutely prepared for this. I don't know how much more prepared you think you can be." And yes, you'll probably make a few mistakes. Being a CEO doesn't come with a book that says, here's every kind of possible situation that could come up with, and it'll help guide you through it. You'll probably make some mistakes, but reach out to other CEOs you know. Talk with them. Be prepared. Ask them about the things they weren't prepared for. And so what I did was I said, yeah, I am prepared for this. And that came from that last bit of advice that I shared with you, which was use your network, use your friends and family. When you're not feeling so confident, they will help build your confidence, and they will help prepare you to be whatever you want to be, whatever steps along the way to CEO-dom there are for you. Use your networks to help you get past any insecurities you might have. I was CEO of that organization for 9 years, and I will tell you that it was just as hard the day I left as the day that I walked in the door into that position. But what happened was throughout that 9 years, I grew my network, I grew my strength, my skills, etc. And there were just different challenges. Most of them challenges that I brought on myself, but they were different challenges, and the work was interesting for me because of the challenges and the network I had built around myself to help me get through those challenges.
Hi, Kathlyn. What has been the hardest decision that you have made throughout your career, and how did you overcome it?
Every decision, any decision that you make as a manager to move somebody out of your team is the hardest decision you will ever make. For 3 reasons. Number 1, you always want to see the hope and the promise of somebody that is on your team. And I never have moved anybody outside of my organization without putting on the full court press and trying to identify what I could do to help that person be successful in their job. Second reason is that it is hard is you know that is that person's livelihood, whether it is their individual livelihood or for their family. And it's a hard decision to impact somebody's livelihood. And the third reason is that then you have to think about the gap that you're creating in your organization and how you're going to fill that gap. It will be the hardest decision you've ever made as a manager to make a decision to move somebody outside of your organization, because it has to be a business decision, a humanistic decision, and it has to be a decision that you make knowing full well that it is for the best decision for you, the organization, and the person. And I can tell you, despite the fact that every time I've moved somebody outside of my organization, I think that for the most part it has always been positive, because what I've tried to do is to help them see that this job may not actually be the best job for them because they're not performing at their best in this job. There will be another job outside the organization that I will often, quite frankly, help them find that they will be better at and they will feel more confident and secure in. But it is even with that approach to moving somebody outside of the organization, it is still the most difficult decision I ever have to make.
Also, I was going to ask you, what really has inspired you to give back to the community? I noticed most of your career choices have been really philanthropic that you've talked about. So what kind of started you in that? Were you kind of in that way, like when you were younger? Did your family kind of guide you that way, or
Yeah.
within?
So a couple of things. It didn't come to me to think about giving back to my community in any way from a philanthropic perspective, time, talent, and treasure. I practice all three in my life today. And what I will tell you is that it didn't come to me very early on. It probably didn't come to me until I was in my 30s. Part of the reason for that had to do with the fact that I came from a family of very modest means. And the first thing that we did in our family when we had time or talent or treasure to offer was to give it to the rest of our family. Our world was fairly small. My worldview was very small about who I should be able to help. And who I could help was my family. Second, I was very early in my life a single mother. I was 25, and by the time I was 25, I had 3 children under the age of 5. And so my time was now devoted to my children. And I thought about a job, like many of you might think about in this room, as a job, not a career. I was just thinking about how I was going to make sure that my children were clothed and fed and doing well in school. So again, I didn't have, I would say, the luxury of giving to my community. And now I will tell you that I truly believe that it is a luxury that I have the opportunity to give back to my community through time, talent, and treasure. And it is because I worked really hard to ensure that I had an education that was going to allow me to reach my career goals, even if early on I didn't know what those career goals were. Other people around me recognized me and they said, "You're a hard worker, you're smart, you're a good collaborator, we want you on the team." And so I kept moving forward. But all the while, I never thought about giving back to my community. I got my education, I moved up my career ladder, and with that came the opportunity to be able to give back. And once you start giving back to your community, I can promise you, you don't want to stop. There will always be something that tugs at your heartstrings, or someone that tugs at your heartstrings, and you can say, I can actually help that person. That's often giving of your financial resources. You'll see an organization that can benefit from your time and your talent, and you'll say, I've got some time to volunteer. Maybe it's a couple hours a week, or maybe it's an intense opportunity that for during a week you can give them 10 to 20 hours for some special project that they're working on. But it didn't come to me right away. It came to me through some of my own personal struggle. I share with people that I have always wanted to ensure that my children were first, and throughout my life, I tried to devote my time to them. And in the process, I brought my children along through volunteerism so that they could learn at an early age to go serve people on Thanksgiving and Christmas in a food line, or go volunteer in a community clinic. So once I learned that I could actually give back, I wanted to make sure my family knew how to do that as well. So it didn't come early, but once I did it, I keep giving back. It not only feels good, but I see the results of it in our community.
Hi, Kathlyn. What are some of the ways that the San Diego Foundation acquires donors and volunteers, or do people come to you?
It's both.
It's both.
So the San Diego Foundation, our number one way that we reach the very generous donors in our community is through word of mouth. Many of our donors tell their friends. I've had a great experience contributing to the San Diego Foundation, and through the San Diego Foundation, they are connecting me to nonprofit organizations in the community that are performing services in my area of interest, whether that is health, education, arts, culture, domestic violence, scholarship programs for youth, etc. So number one is somebody who has a good experience. I want to just take a moment to remind you of that in whatever jobs you do every day. The experience you give to a client will allow them to go out and say to somebody, go to that Starbucks and buy a coffee, or go to that store or restaurant and ask for this person to support you. Word of mouth is the number one way that people will bring business back to you, and no matter what your business does. And I will tell you, it's the number one way that people will reach out to you and say, you know, when you're out of college or when you're ready to make a career change, come work for me. That you will have one opportunity to make a good impression and to provide good service to your client base. And once you've blown that, it's hard to earn it back. So most of it is through word of mouth. We reach out to the community in various forms. We reach out to the business community and ask them to join us. And oftentimes businesses join us. For example, WD-40, Cox, organizations like those have funds with us in San Diego. And their leaders in those businesses then get an experience with us, and they contribute through our organization. Again, whether it is that they volunteer on our various committees or they contribute financially to the organization.
Thank you, guys. Good team questions. Let's get the other half of the team up.
Yes, good questions.
Thank you.
Good questions. Hello there.
I think Richard's going to start first.
Great, okay.
Okay, so obviously you mentioned one of your goals is always providing for your children, but when starting out your career, did you have any other goals, and how did you go about achieving them?
Yeah, and I shared with you earlier that I didn't really necessarily have a career goal, but I knew that I always had to be the best person in my job. I always tried to identify, what does my job description say I should be doing? Is it accurate? I also always met with my manager and asked for feedback. And I will tell you, I often got really good feedback. So I sometimes had to push back and say, give me something that's going to help me grow. Give me something that I could improve upon. I worked very hard to be the best in whatever department or division I was in. So when I worked in banking, for example, my very first job was that I was an adder. And basically what I did was we got checks in throughout the day, and I would add these stacks of checks. Somebody would add next to me, and we'd see if we came up with the same amount for the deposit. And then we moved to optical character recognition, and we typed in the name of the and my goal was always to be the fastest adder. I wanted to be done quicker than anybody else and have the fewest mistakes. So then I started to create competitions with my fellow adders across the table. And I will tell you that we had fun when we were doing the job because we had this competition for being fastest with the fewest mistakes. And I'll also tell you that in that job, before I was 18, I graduated from high school when I was 17. I got that job 2 days after I graduated. And before I was 18 in September, I was supervising that department. My manager said, gosh, you're doing such a good job. We're producing more in this department than we ever have. People are having fun. And they made me a manager. I was not prepared to be a manager when I was 17 years old at a bank, but I did, and I figured it out. So some of it really, I would tell you, begins with my goal to do whatever job I'm doing that day, that week, that month, that year, to the very best of my capability, and then to look around me and say, how can I make the people around me better? Because we're a team, and I want us to shine and stand out to the director, the vice president, the CEO. My goal, just be good at whatever I'm doing right now.
All right, Kathlyn. As you said earlier, you were a mother of 3. So how are you still able to become so successful throughout your career while balancing your family and your work life?
Yeah, that was hard. And I will tell you that if my children were here today, they'd probably say they didn't think it was that hard. They were having fun. But I'll tell you that I would, number one, talk about family and friends. I will always, for the rest of my life, be indebted to my dear parents who helped me whenever I needed to travel. I couldn't pick up my kids after school. I had an early meeting and I had to take them, somebody had to take them to school. My parents were there for me and they helped support me. And consequently, my children are very close to their grandparents today because they were such an important part of their lives. So number one, again, back to your network of family or friends, who can you depend on? Who is interested in your success? And how are you thankful to them and appreciative to them? Second, my kids rarely got to play things like, well, house. They played office. I would say things like, okay, I've got to write a report today. Everybody's going to sit down and we're going to all write reports. Or I would be practicing a presentation and I would say, you practice your presentation in the back of the room. I incorporated my children in my life. I knew that if I wanted to be successful and be the very best at my job, they were going to have to come along for the ride. And I made it fun for them. My kids were writing on whiteboards and making presentations to each other and to me and my parents long before they were ever required to do so in the classroom. And I will say that, yes, you will have these struggles in life, whether it is parenting or a parent. We are all aging. Our parents are aging. Sometimes your parents are more dependent on you. It's how you find ways to incorporate that in your life rather than compartmentalizing it. I incorporated it and I made it work.
And then you also mentioned earlier how important your mentor was in furthering your career. Do you ever do any mentoring yourself?
You know, that's a really good question. I will tell you that I've never, I know that there's this new process of having a formal mentor. And yet I will tell you that I never actually had a formal mentor in my life. I can look back on a variety of people at various stages of my career and say, that person was my mentor. That was the person who challenged me and who encouraged me. And then I might say, hey, can I grab some coffee with you? I have some questions. But I never actually had a formal mentor. And I will tell you that now in my career, I've had several people come to me and say, Kathlyn, I'd like you to be my mentor. And I'm not sure exactly that I've ever actually said, okay, I'll be your mentor. What I've done instead is when somebody has asked me that, I've just given them the time. I say, great, I'm available on Tuesday for coffee, or let's go to lunch on Thursday. It's been fairly informal and unstructured, but when somebody reaches out to me and says, I'd like you to be my mentor, I'd like for you to provide me some advice or counsel, I just do it. So I guess, yeah, I have been a mentor, although maybe not in the formal sense of the word.
Going based off of that question, who do you think has been the most influential person personally and in a business sense?
So personally is my grandmother. I'm a Latina, and my grandparents were migrant farm workers. They had a 6th grade education. And when my grandfather broke his back And my grandparents had 10 children. 10 children. My grandfather broke his back and could not work any longer. And this was in the days, in the 1940s. There was no such thing as workers' comp. My grandfather became the house husband, and my grandmother went out and worked, and she became a housekeeper in 5 very wealthy people's homes. On Monday, she went to the Talons house, and on Tuesday, I still remember all their names. On Tuesday, she went to the McCarthy's house, and on Wednesday, she went to, and so on. And sometimes I would go with her, and I sometimes would watch when she came home at night, really tired. And she fed her family, and everybody was off to bed, and I would sometimes go spend the night at her house and sleep on the sofa, and I'd watch her in the kitchen late at night when everybody was in bed mopping the floor. And I just remember thinking about how tired she must be, and yet she gladly did this every single day for her family. And she is my personal inspiration, and the person that every day when I tell myself, am I tired? I think, I've got some more in me. I can do just a little bit more. My professional inspiration, it's hard to single anybody out, to be very honest with you. There have been several people in my career who have been a real professional inspiration. And I'll begin with a medical doctor who was a female medical doctor who I worked for in Colorado, who was the first female MD MBA in Colorado. And she, with children and a practicing physician, went back and earned her MBA because she wanted to manage a business. And she served as such a wonderful mentor to me, constantly helping me to understand that as a woman we had so much more to carry, you know, the responsibility for our children, the responsibility for our parents, the responsibility in our workplace to lean in and stand up and raise our hands and say I'll do it. Nancy Ashbach is her name, and she was an incredible, incredible mentor to me that I think if I am beginning to think about the series of people then in my life who I chose to work for that became my mentors, she probably kicked it off. And that was really important because when you're applying for a job, they're choosing you just as much as you're choosing them. And it's really important for you to understand that who you work for is going to have to be that inspiration to you. So when I left working for Nancy Ashbach, I came to San Diego and I worked for Blair Sadler and Paul Van Dola at Children's Hospital. And then I went to Sharp and I worked for Pete Ellsworth and with Mike Murphy. And then I had the opportunity to work for Bruce Bedakin at Blue Shield and Dr. Robert Ross at the California Endowment. And now I'm working directly for this board of amazing people that I shared with you. And I can tell you that I chose every one of them. I chose to work for them. I have all these options. You have all these options of who you're going to choose to work for. Choose somebody who will inspire you. I just named 20 years plus, probably 25 years of experience of the people who I chose to work for and who inspired me to be better every day. I hope that you can remember all of the people in the 20 years that helped inspire you. Thank you.
And then, obviously, as CEO, you're incredibly busy and it's a stressful position. What are some of the ways that you try to, just unwind, relieve stress, and keep yourself from?
Yeah. So, I probably always overcommit to doing everything in my life. So I'm really committed to the practice of yoga. And so I try to practice yoga 3 days a week. I am happy if I can pull it off 2 days a week. I just recently went to a new yoga instructor, though, who said to me, even if you don't have an hour, 15 minutes of the basic yoga exercises, these stretches, will be a great way for you to start your day. So I'm beginning to think about how I can actually take myself through the practice of yoga in 15 minutes if I don't have the time. Second, I bicycle. I love to road bike. I didn't always love to road bike. I've been doing it for about 5 years now. And my husband actually got me into it. In 2007, he started to watch what Lance Armstrong was doing with the Tour de France, and I think that would have been his 5th time. And my husband said, I'm going to start riding a bike. And I can tell you that I probably couldn't ride a bike a mile at that time. And now I can ride a bike 30 miles. And I love riding, and I try to do it 2 days a week on the weekends. And then there's more. I love to play tennis. And I've didn't play tennis at all when I was growing up, but about 8 years ago now, I started to play tennis, and I love the game. It's a great mixture of physical activity, and it's a very cerebral game. You have to think about the shots you're making. So what I love about tennis is that it combines the physicality of the game with thinking about what you have to do on the court and how you're going to beat your opponent. And so I play tennis. And I try to fit all of those in the course of a week. And I play tennis twice on the weekend. I ride my bike twice on the weekend. I go to yoga. Those are the things that help reduce the stress. It's the physical nature of reducing the stress. And I would tell you that just taking a walk would probably help reduce the stress of a day. But you've got to do something physical every day for yourself and your body. It's the old, get your mind in tune with your body. I really believe in that. And I can tell you, it gives me more energy. This morning, I went to a cycle class at 5:45 because I knew that I had a very long day, and I thought I could either push the snooze button and try to get more sleep before a meeting with you, or I can get my energy level up, and I did that. So think about what you're doing in your lives, that you're getting that physical energy out, and in the process creating more energy for yourself. And then, believe it or not, I love to try to find time to read. And most of the time when I try to do that, it's really in very short spurts. I may find 15 or 20 minutes to read. It takes me a really long time to get through a book. It takes me a much shorter period to get through an article. So an article in Harvard Business Review, an article in Forbes magazine, an article in the Stanford Social Innovation Forum. I can usually get through those in 15 to 20 minutes. And then I always have a book I'm working on that'll take me a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much, guys. Good
Thank you. Thank you.
Kathlyn, you're not done yet.
Oh, okay.
Now it's the turn of the students, so it's a Q&A open
Oh,
forum for 10
perfect.
minutes.
Great.
Students, they'll raise their hands. Feel free to call upon them.
Sure.
So, questions, guys?
Yes. Please tell me your name.
Hi, my name is Stephanie.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. I know you mentioned the Harvard Review, Business Review, but what are few resources that you recommend for someone to gain more insight, becoming a better leader?
Yeah. So I will tell you of all the resources that I listed, and I'll list another one in a moment, but I'd like to encourage you to read the Stanford Social Innovation Forum. It's in your library. You can look at it online. What I love about that publication is that it really helps me to think differently. I think that the important thing that is happening in your lives and at this point of your education and career is thinking differently. Certainly education is here to help you think outside the box and solve problems in a different way. But when I read that publication and I find ways that people are attacking and addressing social problems in a very innovative way. It always inspires me. I also will tell you that in addition to the list that I read off earlier, I really love reading Fast Times and Wired. I think that both those magazines tend to be for an audience that is younger, that is your age. But I will tell you that I, at 56 years old, really believe that I have the ability to learn more from people like yourselves. What are you paying attention to in the technology field? How are you collaborating and connecting with people who aren't in your community or maybe even in your city or your state? I love both those magazines, and the truth of the matter is those articles are fairly short, so I can get through them, get some intellectual popcorn in a quick period of time and move on. So those are my recommendations. Other questions?
You've had a few different career fields you've been in, especially after college. What attributes did you really put out there to get your first line of work? I mean, I know you were a manager at a bank, but did you change fields right after that, or?
Yes, I did. Good question, John. I actually think that across disciplines, we all have what is often referred to as transferable skills, right? If you're good at math, there isn't probably any business or any industry that doesn't need somebody who's good at math and accounting who's part of that team. If you're good at marketing or communications, there's probably no business or industry that doesn't need somebody across the organization who's good at those skills. I was really good at management. At least I think so. And many of the employees who've worked for me throughout the years have said so. And I believe it because oftentimes I've had several employees who have come back to work for me when I've changed companies. And so I think that's a good sign if people will say, I wasn't working for you for a period of time and I came back. They know what to expect in terms of my expectations. And so I always believed in management. How I could, number one, motivate and inspire people to be their best. How, as an organization, we could get the very best from people who reported to me. Two, how I could encourage, sometimes require, collaboration. And once you require collaboration, it becomes natural, and people start working together. And then having the ability to have candid conversations with people when they're doing well, but then they've gotten to a comfort zone, and you know that now they're just doing well, but they could really do better. I saw that you're reading Good to Great, and I love that book. I live it in my life every day, because as soon as you get to great, you're really just good again, right? And then you have to set the bar for that next level of greatness in whatever you do. And so sometimes you have to have the candid conversation with people that you were great, but what's your next audacious goal to be great again? And sometimes you have to, as I talked about earlier, have the conversation with people that this may not be the job for them. That's what management is about. It's really sort of that understanding of all of those aspects that are necessary in your work. I say that it's absolutely okay to specialize in what you do if you're really good in finance or accounting or communications. I tended to be more of a generalist, and I could do well across all of those disciplines, pulling them all together in a management role. I love management.
My name is Saul, and I guess now that you're taking over the San Diego Foundation, what is your plan for it? Do you want it to keep expanding, like you were saying, in 20 years it went 10 times, or do you want to take more interest in different activities? What's your plan for it now?
It's a very good question, Saul. Saul's question was, what are my plans for the San Diego Foundation? First, my plan for the San Diego Foundation is to try to identify ways we can work more collaboratively with the rest of the philanthropic community. We have oftentimes in the philanthropic community operated in our own silos. And I look at it and think, imagine what we could achieve if we collaborated. I like to talk about the fact that there are times in business, it's sort of like a jazz ensemble. If you've ever seen a really good jazz ensemble, the music is oftentimes goes through these periods of individual solos. So the guitar player might step forward and perform a solo, and the rest of the ensemble is playing in the background. And then, without much ado, the guitarist steps back into the ensemble and the trumpet player steps forward. And the trumpet player performs their solo and the rest of the ensemble supports that. And the same thing happens with the drummer and so on. I believe that in philanthropy, we really are an ensemble, and there are various points along the way where each of us should step forward and do our solo. But we should all be supportive of one another in our work. So my goal is to try to identify ways where philanthropy can be more collaborative. I also would like to find ways where we can, with our individual donors, seek what is referred to as more collective impact. So if I look around this room today, each of you probably have an area of interest. It might be domestic violence, that you want to reduce domestic violence in our community. You may want to increase graduation rates in our community. You may want to increase the number of children who know how to swim by the time they're in 3rd grade. You may have an area of interest all your own. But I would also posit that if we coupled those of you with like interests, we could make better progress with 2 or 3 of you working together as opposed to individually. Many of our donors are working on their individual areas of interest, and I would like to connect them with others who have a similar interest, albeit not exactly the same, so that we can actually make a bigger impact in our community. So more collaboration, more collective impact. Certainly, we want to grow the organization because looking forward 10 or 20 years, we have no idea the kinds of challenges that we will be facing in the years forward. And I would like to ensure that we're developing a very giving community of time, talent, and treasure that will be able to give in the years to come. So, you know, it's sort of looking forward and saying, how will we be prepared for what we don't know today?
Kathlyn, thank you so much. I'm sure the students will agree.
Thank you all. Thank you so very much for having me here today. It's
great
been my pleasure.
Yeah, it was a great kickoff for our semester. So
Perfect.
I hope everyone lives up to your.
Oh my. Thank you so very much.